Well, that was disappointing. I did not expect that. If you are trying to grow food in your garden and you are struggling with production or yield, you might be making the same mistake that I am. We are getting ready to head into our fall season, which means that we are going to be growing a lot of food here in the South. This is our prime season. We have been dealing with this heat during the summer and it has been awful. But in preparation for fall, we need to check a couple things. And one of those things is how our soil is doing. Because if you feed the soil, you're going to feed your plants. It's been 2 years since I did a soil test, so I am way overdue for a soil test. In the meantime, I have been doing like these little at-home tests, and I've come to find out they're not very reliable or accurate. So I decided that it was time to do a full-blown scientific soil test. I reached out to Epic Gardening and had them send me one of their soil tests, and we're gonna do it together. Time I ordered it until the time I received it was about a week, and it came in a small little box, and inside the box was an instruction card, a plastic baggie with a soil line, as well as all the return information. Very, very simple process. The instructions does detail how to go about doing the soil test, but it's really, really simple. So first thing I did was I took samples of my soil. So I went about 4 to 6 inches down, basically where the roots of the plants would live. And I went and picked 4 of my beds. Now the reason I picked 4 of my beds is because I put these beds in, I have 9 beds, but I put them all in at different times. So I started out with these 4 right here, and then down that pathway over there, I put in a set of 2, and then I put in another set of 2, and then I put in my last one. So I wanted to get soil from each one of those times that I planted so that I could get an even idea of what all the soil looked like across all of the beds. So I dug down into each one of the beds about 4 to 6 inches and pulled out about 1 scoop of dirt from each. I mixed it together in a bucket, and then I picked out any pieces that shouldn't or isn't soil, right? So sticks, roots, bugs, whatever. I just wanted dirt. And so after I had sifted through it and got rid of all that stuff, we went and put that into the baggie. So we opened up the container, put it into the baggie. The baggie has a soil line. So it wants you to put enough soil to reach that soil line. Pretty simple, right? It wasn't complicated at all. I sealed the bag, put it in the box, and then I sealed the box. The box comes with all of the shipping information on it. You don't have to fill anything out. You don't have to drop it off anywhere special. You just put all this stuff in the box, seal the box, and head out to your mailbox. It took about a week for the soil test to come back, and we got it. They emailed it to me last night. Let's go check out how the soil's doing. So I got the test back, and there was a few things that were surprising. So let me show you what they sent. So as you can see on this front page, it shows the result date that I did, the kit testing number, and then this chart down here at the bottom that shows all the different things that it's measuring and whether they are high, medium, low, optimal, too high, those kinds of things. And a lot of my stuff was much higher than it should be, or much higher than what is optimal. So we're going to look into each one of these. So the first one is my soil pH. My soil pH is 7.1. Now what you're aiming for is usually something in the 6s, 6 to 7. I'm a little smidge above that. Their range is 6.2 to 6.8. I'm at a 7.1. My natural soil, like sandy soil, is I think usually about 6.5. So by adding a lot of this compost, I have increased the soil pH a little bit. We're going to talk about more about the compost in just a second, but my soil pH being at 7.1, it's not going to be like highly detrimental, so I'm not really worried about it. But if your soil was maybe higher, you are going to want to use something like sulfur to bring it down. It's a lot harder to bring it down than it is to bring it up, because sulfur takes many, many months to work. Now, if it's the reverse, if you have a lower pH and you need to raise it up to that 6.2, you're going to want to use lime, and that is an amendment that you can add to the garden. It does raise it rather quickly, so you want to go slowly. It's kind of like salt, adding salt to your food. You can't take it out once you put it in, so you go slowly adding it over time. The next item is going to be the organic matter. So once again, this is basically the two things that I do in the garden that really contribute to this is compost. I make my own homemade compost, and then also using organic mulches. Wood chips, grass clipping, leaf litter, those kinds of things break down rather quickly and they add to the organic matter. I am high. I'm at 10.43. This is a positive thing. They want the range between 5 and 6.9. I've heard other people say that 8 is the magic number. I've seen other gardeners, there's like Jim Kovaleski, he's on Pete Canaris' channel on Green Dreams. They got theirs recently back and it was like 20% and they weren't worried about it. So I'm certainly not going to worry about 10.43. It's excellent. Now, the excessive amounts or the higher amounts than what is in the optimal range has contributed to some other issues in my soil, which I'll show you in a moment. But having a lot of organic matter, especially in a garden here in Florida where we get a lot of rain, a lot of leaching, a lot of sand, it's good. Now, the other element around organic matter is the capacity to retain nutrients, or CEC. The range for this one is 11 to 16 and I am at 30. I think this has to do with the large amount of compost that I use, that organic matter in my soil. So what it means is that it's able to hold on to the nutrients in the soil rather than it leaching or evaporation or just not being able to be used by the plant. So having a higher number is better than having a lower number. If you have a lower number, usually this is indicative of not enough organic matter, and it also might indicate that your soil is too acidic. So back to that pH and organic matter that we were talking about earlier. Now we're going to get into the micronutrients. I want to just stop for a second and let you know, if you do want to get one of these soil tests, I'll have a link down into the description for Epic Gardening's soil test. They do have a sale that's going to be coming up next week. I believe it's August 27th. It's their Labor Day sale. Not sure if the soil test is going to be on there, but they have a lot of other awesome things. You guys know I love their seed trays. Total game changer when it comes to seed starting. And also they have really cool grow bags with lining. They have birdie beds and they have botanical interest seeds. So lots of really good stuff. Make sure to check it out. So now let's look at the phosphorus. This is where things have not gone well in my garden, and I'm actually a little bit embarrassed to show you this, but my phosphorus level is 289. The optimal range is 42 to 68. I am way, way, way far above what I should be. And I kind of know what happened here. Adding organic matter is going to increase a lot of the macronutrients, probably not to this level. So what I had been doing was using those little at-home tests in between. Like I said, I did this 2 years ago, and so here I am 2 years later doing it again. In between those times, I would test my soil using the at-home kits. The at-home kits every single time told me all of my macronutrients, my nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium were depleted every time. So I'm thinking, oh wow, I am moving through these amendments rather quickly. I need to put more down. So for, I think it was a year and a half, I kept putting it down, and it kept coming back, depleted, depleted, depleted. And, halfway through that second year, I thought to myself, I don't think this is right. I could not be adding that much and it still tell me it's depleted. And that's what's kind of led me to, okay, once summer is over, I'm going to do a soil test because I don't know if I can trust those at-home tests. And I was right because I have added way too much phosphorus. The way I added my phosphorus, by using bone meal. The other thing was fertilizers. So I, thinking my soil was depleted, kept adding more and more, organic fertilizers, yes, but still fertilizers to my garden that had large amounts of phosphorus. Now, a lot of the times we think about our nitrogen getting depleted rather quickly, and that does actually happen, but phosphorus apparently is not one that depletes very quickly. So that should have been my first indicator that maybe those tests were not correct, and they are not. So now I have an excessive amount of phosphorus. This is not good. This is actually pretty bad. The plants are going to show that there's too much phosphorus in the soil. They're going to struggle a little bit. Might be why I have so much disease in my garden, because they're struggling against all of these nutrients that are too excessive. I also brought in a bunch of bulk compost to try to refill my beds. So maybe I used too much of that stuff. Maybe that stuff was a little high in phosphorus. Could be the excessive amount of compost that I was using. Could be the excessive amount of bone meal. All of that to say I have way too much phosphorus in my soil. There's not really an easy way of getting rid of it at this point other than actually digging out the soil and replacing it with something like sand or topsoil that doesn't have it. So I am going to, at this point, grow in my garden for a year without using any amendments and any fertilizer, which is different for me. But I feel like with my soil, the way that it's showing on this soil test, I feel like it's going to be fine. The only thing I might add is nitrogen in the form of blood meal or alfalfa meal. I'm still kind of working out which one I want to use. I have to take into account that it cannot have even a trace amount of phosphorus, and it also cannot have some other things that are a little high for me as well. If your phosphorus is low, then you're going to use something like bone meal. You'll notice on here that I didn't say nitrogen, which is another interesting thing I didn't know about. There's not a really good solid test for nitrogen, apparently, when it comes to these types of soil tests, these scientific soil tests. They don't have that kind of test to do. So that kind of tells me that those at-home tests probably aren't right when it comes to nitrogen either. So you kind of have to take a look at your leaves at this point. If your leaves are yellowing, most likely you're dealing with a nitrogen issue. So I am going to put a small amount of nitrogen into my soil, but absolutely zero phosphorus. The part about the phosphorus that's a little embarrassing is that where I live in Florida, it's a big push not to put too much phosphorus in your ground because it can leach into the waterways. And so this is like the thing that I did not want to show up on this because I of course don't want to hurt our waterways. But since I'm here, I guess the plus side of this phosphorus being too high is that the capacity to retain nutrients, the number we looked at before, is also very high, which means hopefully it is holding on to as much as possible inside of the soil and hopefully not leaching that much. But I am making a commitment. I'm not putting a single thing in my soil for a year. And before I ever touch the soil with another drop of phosphorus, I am going to do another soil test to ensure that my phosphorus levels have come down. The next one on the list, equally important to nitrogen and phosphorus, is potassium. Mine is within the optimal range. Yay! The thing that I use to keep my potassium levels up is kelp meal. So that one usually works for me. It is only potassium. It doesn't have phosphorus or nitrogen. And since I am in the optimal range and it doesn't deplete very quickly in the soil, it should be fine, hopefully, for the year. You can see I'm kind of on the high side. So if you are depleted, you can use something like kelp meal. And of course, adding compost will always improve these numbers like potassium and phosphorus and nitrogen. It can even help with your pH. The next one on the list is calcium. I am in the range, 79% when you want to be between 70 and 85. This is great for me. I'm kind of like right in the middle. Calcium is one of the things that leads to blossom end rot, although some say that it's the overwatering or underwatering where the plant can't take up the calcium because of the watering. Either way, calcium is needed when you're growing tomatoes or fruiting plants. This is probably one of the reasons why I've never had an issue with blossom end rot. Typically here in Florida, a lot of people will have problems with calcium because we live in an area with very sandy soil. It drains off very quickly. The nutrients don't have that capacity to hold. So your big push here is add compost. Lots and lots of compost, organic materials. That's going to add some of that calcium. You can also add potassium fertilizers in. I love Tomato Tone by Espama. Down to Earth has a tomato and vegetable one that works very well too. All of those have the calcium in it that you would need. Next up is magnesium. I'm a little low on magnesium, not by much, but the range should be 15 to 25%. I'm at 10%. This is kind of backwards because magnesium is usually low, I believe, in colder climates. In tropical climates, magnesium tends to be high. I am in a tropical, subtropical climate. It should be high. The only thing I can come to is that, I'm really not sure. And the way to resolve it is to add fertilizer, which I cannot do. So what I did do is Whitwam Organics has a foliar spray of micronutrients. So it doesn't have things like nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium, but it does have some of the things like calcium, magnesium, copper, those kinds of things in this liquid foliar spray. So I can spray the leaves of my plants that may be showing magnesium deficiency and stay away from adding it to the soil. And that's probably what I'm going to do. But I'm not that far, 5% away, which is kind of a big number, but I'm not that bad. So I'm probably going to wait until I can see that the plants are showing it, and they'll produce, veining, yellowing color on the leaves. That will be my indicator that maybe they don't have enough magnesium. And then I will do just a foliar spray of a micronutrient liquid. It's more of an amendment than it is a fertilizer, and I have to make sure not to get it on the soil. This one was interesting. The next one up is sulfur. I'm at 57. You need to be between 29 and 36. This is making sense to me. All of these kind of go together, which it just makes sense now why I'm seeing certain things. So if my pH is at 7.1, that usually means that I have kind of a lot of something in it causing it to increase the pH. Well, sulfur increases pH. So somehow I have a lot of sulfur in my soil. This is more likely than not having something to do with either my watering through my well or atmospheric here in Florida. It's going to be just common. And it's very hard to get sulfur out of the soil. It's kind of like phosphorus in that you have to remove the soil and bring in more. I'm not doing that. But one thing that does help with sulfur is removing the plants from the soil, not allowing the plants to break down in the soil. And you guys, if you've been watching the channel, you know I absolutely love to allow my plants to be mulch. So once they have died off, the plant material either becomes compost or becomes mulch. But I can't allow that now. I've got to try to pull some of these nutrients out, like the phosphorus and the sulfur, so that I can bring my pH down and I can make sure I'm not messing up our waterways. So I will not be leaving plant debris in the garden. I will probably only be leaving wood chips on as a mulch, so that and larger wood chips, I'm not going to do the thin ones because I don't want them to break down as fast, and I don't want them to push sulfur into the soil. The other thing that I used to do that I'm going to revert on is I always used to use, like, if a plant was finished growing, instead of pulling the plant and the roots, I would just cut it, the stem at the base of the plant, leave the roots in the ground. It leaves the nutrients in the ground. That plant's roots create new nutrients. All that is great for organic material. I have plenty of organic material. If I pull those roots out, those roots are going to be pulling with it some of the nutrients and, pulling it out of the ground. And I kind of want to do that based on how rich my soil is. So from here on out for the next year, besides not using fertilizer or amendments, I'm also going to be pulling my plants by the roots. If you don't have very much organic material in your garden, I do not encourage you to do that. Once this is over and I can get some of these numbers under control, I'll go back to leaving that in the ground. It's better for the soil life. It's better for the garden. But in the meantime, I'm going to be pulling them out. Next one is zinc. Very high. Zinc is very high. 38. It should be 328. Not 38, but 328. This zinc is kind of related to phosphorus, or at least the products that bring phosphorus into the yard usually bring zinc into the yard. It could also be manufacturing, like if there was plants, like manufacturing plants nearby. I don't believe that is the case near here, but it could be. More likely than not, it was because of my excessive phosphorus. How I introduced it, probably that bone meal had zinc as well. Maybe the compost, the bulk compost that I got, had excessive zinc as well as excessive phosphorus. Either way, the same treatment that I'm doing for the phosphorus should work for the zinc. Manganese. I'm a little under on manganese as well as the magnesium that I was earlier. So 21 to 51, I'm at 17. It's a little bit low. A lot of this goes back to having too much organic material. Something about having too much compost in your soil can cause this maybe to still be in the soil but not be available to the plants. which is more important, right? If you had 51 parts per million manganese, but that was not available for the plant because it's locked up from other nutrients like the excessive phosphorus and the excessive zinc, it may make the manganese not able to be absorbed by the plants. So that's the problem that I'm having with this one. If your manganese is too high, not the problem I'm having, but if yours is too high, could be the fungicide you're using. So I did some research on this one, and apparently there's certain fungicides that when you use them in the garden, they build up, and they can build up excessive amounts of manganese. So be careful with those fungicides. The next one is iron. I'm double on this one too, 110. It should be 11 to 51. So I am double the highest part of the range. This is most likely because of the excessive amount of organic material, the excessive amount of compost, the amendments that I have, and possibly my water, my well water. We're actually talking about this. My husband and I talked about possibly having the water of the well tested. We don't drink that water. It's mainly used for the garden. But I think at this point, seeing some of these numbers, not sure if it's just because of some of the actions I've taken or if it's actually excessive amounts in the water. So I think it would be good for us to test our water now just to make sure. Copper, 6.7. It should be 1.6 to 3.1. I know exactly what this one is. This is double the amount of the highest side of the optimal range. This is because of copper fungicide. I used to use copper fungicide. I've actually gotten into hydrogen peroxide lately, more now to treat disease. But before I used hydrogen peroxide, which has probably been over the last 9 months, I used copper fungicide. And I had read that it could build up in the soil, and apparently it did. There's other reasons that might cause this, but that one tends to be probably the most obvious reason. If you're using copper fungicide, you might notice that it increases the copper in your soil. Boron, I was in range. 1.85, it should be from 1.3 to 2.6. This one was interesting because I did want to do a little research on what causes it to go high, what causes it to go low. And apparently what causes it to go high is using well water in a sandy area like here. So I would expect it to be high and also not tilling. I don't till. So that also could be what causes it to be high, but mine's in normal range, so I'm not going to worry about that. Speaking of tilling, that is another option for me to help break up the lockup of some of these. I could till, and by tilling, I could break up the soil a little bit better, and it could break up some of the nutrients and allow them to come out more easily. I haven't 100% decided on that. I'm kind of weighing a couple more things, like should I till the soil? Will that help with some of this excessive nutrients? Will it cause it to leach? Because I don't really want that. The other thing is, should I bring in sand? I've been considering like maybe I should just bring in a good amount of sand, add a third of the volume of my beds, add sand and kind of till that in to help break up some of this. So if you have some suggestions, head down to the comment, let me know what you think. Let me know if you've done a soil test or if you're going to go ahead and pick this one up and do one for yourself. I can't wait to see your results because mine was really eye-opening of some of the changes I need to do. I hope this was helpful to you guys. Make sure to give me a big thumbs up. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. I had fun with you. Happy gardening, everyone.